Hello, friends and insiders. This is Government Unfiltered. I'm Dan Williams. On July 28, 2020, the Democratic staff of the U.S. Senate's Committee on Foreign Relations released a 46-page report documenting their concerns with regard to length of vacancies of key positions within the State Department, as well as the vetting of nominees for presidential appointees that have to be confirmed by the Senate, and issues of morale under Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's leadership. As I mentioned, this is a report from the Democratic staff, and after reading this episode's report, I'll talk about something that could be coming from the Republican side very soon. And if it ends up being a report, it could be something I cover in an upcoming episode. I don't pick these documents based on politics. I try and pick ones that I find interesting. There have been a couple that I get a few pages in, get bored, and decide to do something else. And that brings me to the reason for this podcast. I started this show because I feel there are so many important public documents that are available that many of us just get the basic sound bites from news reports on television or through newspaper articles that provide a little more depth. But I often find that I want more context or a better understanding of the information. I also like to avoid the political commentary we often get through those media reports. Because I believe there is value in making information like these rather large documents easier to access and digest. It's why I'm building this podcast on the value for value model. So if you believe there's value in having public documents in podcast form and available to share, all I ask is that you decide what that's worth to you and contribute to supporting the show. It's through your donations that helps make information like this available and accessible to everyone. To help support these episodes, you can go to governmentunfiltered.com, or you can support via Patreon at insiderfriends.com. I'll be thanking the supporters who donated over the past month at the end of the episode. And now, on to this episode's document. Diplomacy in Crisis: The Trump Administration's Decimation of the State Department. A Democratic staff report prepared for the use of the Committee on Foreign Relations, United States Senate. July 28, 2020. Executive Summary. Every day, at home and abroad, the people who make up the Department of State help keep Americans safe from conflict, secure from terrorism, advance America's economic interests, embody our best values, and represent us to the world. The department's public servants are dedicated to serving the nation, regardless of party, president, or politics, and they do so with little fanfare, out of public view, and often at great sacrifice. Yet, under President Trump, the Department of State and its dedicated career public servants have found themselves under attack. Nonpartisan public servants have been smeared as the deep state, accused of trying to undermine the president, and labeled radical unelected bureaucrats. Over the last 3.5 years, the department has been plagued by a hiring freeze, a bungled reform effort, proposals to slash its funding by 1/3, and persistent vacancies, all of which have hampered its effectiveness. While Secretary Pompeo came into office stating his intentions to reverse some of the administration's more damaging personnel policies, under his tenure, critical senior positions remain vacant without nominees, making it more difficult for the department to do America's work on the global stage. Assistant secretaries, key ambassadorships, and other senior positions have sat empty for months, in some cases years, without nominees for Senate confirmation. A number of vacancies exist because many of the president's nominees for national security posts lack the character and fitness expected of U.S. diplomats, and their nominations therefore languish in the Senate. The White House has repeatedly ignored basic due diligence and vetting, struggling or unable to find individuals willing to serve in this administration and of suitable fitness to represent the United States. Allegations of retaliation and reprisal persist, and Secretary Pompeo has been missing in action when it comes to defending his own staff and organization. Examples abound of how the department's senior officials act in contravention of the professional ethos heralded by Secretary Pompeo. The result is the State Department feeling besieged, demoralized, battered, beaten, mistreated, paralyzed, and at a new low. Recent months have only compounded this reality. Late on a Friday night in May 2020, the President, at Secretary Pompeo's urging, ousted the State Department Inspector General charged with conducting independent oversight, whose work has revealed significant challenges and defects the department and its leadership faces, and who was investigating the secretary's own conduct at the time of his firing. Meanwhile, as the nation struggles to confront and address systemic racism, diplomats abroad face significant challenges in representing the United States and the ideals our nation embodies to the rest of the world. The State Department itself has significant challenges with regard to diversity, as non-white Foreign Service officers and department employees, especially Hispanic and African American employees, continue to struggle to advance and reach the upper echelons of leadership in the State Department. This Senate Foreign Relations Committee Democratic Staff Report catalogs some of these significant challenges. Employees report that their morale and their confidence in their senior leaders have dropped precipitously. Many are far more fearful today than they were 3 years ago to report a violation of law, and are equally afraid they will be subjected to reprisal. Political appointees harboring suspicion about career public servants' perceived political affiliations have engaged in demoralizing and unjustified actions that have endangered the livelihoods of dedicated public servants. At the same time, the department's turmoil has brought to light institutional deficiencies that can be addressed, and protections for employees that should be strengthened. This report calls for a strong response to the chaos and mismanagement of the department by the Trump administration. Congress must take action to leave the department's dedicated employees better protected and more effective, and in doing so, further safeguard America's national security. These years of intentional and collateral damage to the diplomatic workforce could not have come at a worse time. In addition to the multitude of traditional foreign policy challenges facing our diplomats, the depletion of the department and the diplomatic corps have made it even more difficult to address the unprecedented challenges of COVID-19. The systemic challenges of senior-level vacancies, understaffing, and unqualified nominees, compounded with U.S. pandemic underpreparedness, have left U.S. diplomats feeling directionless and that they are fending for themselves. The Trump administration's negligence and its attacks on our diplomatic corps, who serve on the front lines of our global pandemic response, have left diplomats devoid of leadership and cost the United States valuable time in preparedness and response efforts. The President has undermined the United States' role as a global leader, withdrawing from international organizations, agreements, and commitments, seeking to walk back our responsibilities to allies and partners, and retreating from leading the response to global crises. The State Department stands as our first line of defense on all these fronts to ensure that America does not become less secure. To keep America at the forefront and to keep Americans safe and prosperous, we must build, retain, and stand up for a diplomatic corps that embodies the best of our nation. This report is based on an extensive Democratic staff analysis of the administration's nominees, department vacancies, State Department Office of the Inspector General reports and findings, and employee viewpoint survey data from 2016 to 2019. It also draws from public reports and statements by former officials documenting a decline in morale and an increased fear of retaliation, and the effect those had on the departures of several public servants from the department. Chapter 1 examines the pattern of vacancies and acting officials that has characterized the Trump administration's State Department and the impact on U.S. foreign policy. Chapter 2 highlights examples of the administration's failure to adequately vet nominees and its practice of nominating candidates who lack the fitness to serve as U.S. diplomats. Chapter 3 describes incidents of retaliations and attacks against diplomats and career public servants that have had a corrosive effect on morale. Chapter 4 presents employee survey results from selected bureaus demonstrating that a crisis in morale and lack of faith in leadership at the department has increased to staggering levels. It also shows how the administration's response to ongoing racial injustice affects the ability of U.S. diplomats to fulfill their mission. Chapter 5 sets out a series of recommendations and guiding principles to start the rebuilding that must take place over the coming years. Key findings. Vacancies and acting officials at the department have persisted through 2 secretaries of state, despite numerous commitments to fill key positions. 3.5 years into the administration, 11 assistant secretary or undersecretary posts, more than 1/3, are vacant or filled by acting officials. As of July 2020, more than half of Senate-confirmed department positions have been filled at least once by someone who had not been confirmed. Career public servants report that senior leadership exhibits a sense of disrespect and disdain for their work, prompting many to leave and contributing to a loss of expertise at the department. Senior leadership's lack of accountability and refusal to defend career employees against attacks has contributed to declining morale and a drop in confidence in leadership. From 2016 to 2019, employees in key bureaus reported steep increases in fear of reprisal for reporting suspected violations of law and declining confidence in senior department leadership. Key recommendations. This report makes 10 recommendations aimed at reversing the downward trends in morale, strengthening protections for employees, and ensuring the individuals leading our foreign policy are of the caliber that the American people deserve in their diplomats. 1. Rebuild and retain expertise in the State Department's ranks. 2. Reduce barriers to restoring lost expertise, and for former diplomats and civil servants to return to the department. 3. Promote more career employees to senior positions. 4. Increase diversity at senior ranks and throughout the department. 5. Formalize the State Department exit survey process. 6. Initiate a review of how the corridor reputation system at the department enables or exacerbates the challenges outlined in the report. 7. Restore and commit to minimum vetting standards for nominees. 8. Prioritize and fill senior leadership slots. 9. Maintain an independent inspector general. 10. Enforce accountability for improper personnel practices and management. Prologue. Diplomacy 101. Why the State Department Matters. Quote, "We have got to understand that what we do in the world is not only good for the world, it's good for us. It's not a form of philanthropy, it's a form of national security." Unquote. Richard Hawes, President of the Council on Foreign Relations. In the midst of the COVID-19 outbreak, in a heroic effort from late January 2020 to June 2020, the State Department repatriated more than 100,000 Americans from 136 countries to the United States after many nations suspended international flights and closed their borders to slow the spread of the virus. A few years earlier, employees from the State Department's San Juan and Dallas passport agencies helped evacuate more than 1,200 Americans and their families from St. Martin after Hurricanes Irma and Jose ravaged the island, ensuring that they were quickly and safely returned home. Under both the Obama and Trump administrations, diplomats have negotiated for years to successfully obtain the release of several U.S. citizen detainees from Iranian prisons. This is just some of the work diplomatic professionals carry out every day, often behind the scenes, with the public unaware of the effort and sacrifice that helps keep Americans safe. Today, diplomatic professionals at home and through more than 270 embassies, consulates, and missions abroad help America fight terrorism, stop the proliferation of nuclear weapons, end the modern slave trade, reduce global poverty, mitigate climate change, end hunger and malnutrition, and stop the trafficking of drugs. Our diplomats help Americans adopt children from foreign countries, provide life-saving humanitarian aid to people fleeing conflict and persecution, support Americans caught in disasters abroad, bolster American cybersecurity, and expand American businesses. Department personnel also help ensure the United States is a good steward of American taxpayer dollars by monitoring and evaluating the performance of foreign assistance programs. Diplomats help keep U.S. political leaders informed of critical developments around the world, how foreign governments are responding to U.S. policy, and the state of relations with our allies and our adversaries. Department personnel engage in critical information gathering and analysis, which informs and influences our national security decisions. The State Department also promotes American democratic values, such as free and fair elections, transparency in government, protection of basic human rights and freedoms, and equality amongst all peoples. Historically, the department has carried out these many varied roles on a budget 19 times smaller than the U.S. defense budget, and, while the gap between the defense and international affairs budgets has decreased in recent years, the department still operates on a budget 12 times smaller than the defense budget. In carrying out these duties, department employees face a range of threats, including political violence, crime, terrorism, natural disasters, exposure to health hazards, and more. Some make the ultimate sacrifice for their country. As of May 2019, 250 diplomats had lost their lives while serving abroad, including 8 U.S. ambassadors who have died in the line of duty. The State Department's diplomatic corps, comprised of foreign and civil service, represents highly talented and specialized individuals. More than 60% of foreign service officers have advanced degrees. U.S. diplomats are trained to communicate in over 70 foreign languages. Characterized by excellence and professionalism, U.S. diplomats are recognized by Congress as essential in the national interest to assist the President and the Secretary of State in conducting the foreign affairs of the United States. Abroad, foreign service officers serve in hardship posts without their families, or bring family members along in non-hardship posts, moving every 2 to 3 years. Spouses give up careers or studies, and children lose friends and are forced to navigate the disorienting experience of frequent moves. These combined sacrifices are a testament to the dedication of public servants who serve our nation and dedicate their lives to promoting American democratic values. Preventing conflict. From its inception in 1789 as America's first federal agency, the State Department has been responsible for navigating relationships between the U.S. and foreign nations, negotiating the end to foreign conflicts, and establishing the foundation for international peace and cooperation through alliances. Its diplomats and other professionals play, in the words of former Secretary of State James A. Baker III, quote, indispensable roles in maintaining security and peace at home and around the world, unquote. Diplomatic professionals remain our first line of defense against war because they can stop the conflicts before they start. U.S. diplomats preempt war declarations with peaceful resolutions and have convinced countries to abandon weapons of mass destruction. Then Commander of U.S. Central Command, General James Mattis, recognized the important role that diplomacy plays in avoiding conflicts when he told Congress, quote, if you don't fund the State Department fully, then I need to buy more ammunition, unquote. Promoting U.S. businesses. One of the highest, but lesser-known priorities of our embassies abroad is to promote U.S. business interests. 96% of global consumers live outside the United States, and diplomacy is essential in promoting U.S. exports and creating a level playing field for American businesses abroad. These efforts create real benefits for American communities. For example, in 2019, Texas exported $330.5 billion worth of goods, which supported more than 910,000 jobs in the state. Foreign direct investment into Texas supported an additional 622,700 jobs in 2017. In 2019, California exported $174 billion worth of goods, which supported more than 683,000 jobs. Foreign direct investment supported an additional 802,800 jobs. The department also provides visas for more than 1 million foreign students and tourists in the United States, who generate about $240 billion every year for the U.S. economy. Securing alliances and countering terrorism. America is stronger when we have allies to help us pursue our interests. Our diplomats build, strengthen, and maintain the alliances and partnerships that make America safer and more prosperous. Through these treaties, partnerships, and security agreements, our diplomatic professionals help our country adapt and thrive in an increasingly complex world with global challenges such as climate change, cyber attacks, and transnational crime. As one diplomat put it, quote, diplomacy is the art of turning contacts into friends, and friends into partners as we work together to solve common challenges, contribute to global development, and work towards achieving shared goals, unquote. One area the diplomatic workforce leverages our alliances in is counterterrorism. Through partnerships such as the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, and the 79-member Global Coalition to Defeat ISIS, which is the largest international coalition in history, the State Department works to detect, degrade, and dismantle terrorist networks. Diplomats and civil servants also work to address the root causes of extremism and counter violent extremist narratives. Alongside its international partners, the department works with nearly a dozen American cities and more than 100 cities globally to counter violent extremism and terrorism. Conclusion. The nation's diplomatic personnel are, in the State Department's words, the department's greatest asset. U.S. diplomats carry out the foreign policy of the United States on behalf of all Americans. Retired Ambassador Mary Carmen Aponte captured well the nature of their commitment. Quote, "Every single day I was at the embassy, I saw what the diplomats do for the bottom line of the United States. They help Americans in trouble overseas. They advocate for American businesses and create American jobs via trade agreements. They make the world safer by negotiating nuclear and non-proliferation accords. They facilitate American travel abroad by issuing passports. They promote the rule of law and use aid to help countries to develop so that their people don't feel that they have to immigrate. They help mitigate and resolve conflicts. They promote legitimate travel and promote study in the U.S., which helps our economy and our universities. They help in times of natural disasters, and they are front and center during outbreaks, epidemics, and pandemics." Unquote. Nowhere have the heroic efforts and sacrifice of our diplomats been on fuller display than during the unprecedented COVID-19 pandemic. Department employees worked tirelessly, managing crucial information sharing with their domestic counterparts, foreign governments, and Americans, and working to mitigate the impacts of the crisis as it unfolded in real time. They also did so with little guidance from senior leadership early on in the pandemic. In March 2020, the president abruptly announced travel restrictions on European countries, and diplomats fielded calls from blindsided international counterparts and panicked Americans trying to get home. As the virus began to spread more rapidly, diplomats did not know how to handle visa requests or how the department planned to prevent spread at overseas posts, and they were troubled by the lack of transparency around the number of internal COVID-19 cases at the department. One diplomat concluded, quote, "Every embassy is just making it up as we go along. There's no uniformity," unquote. As the virus added to the workload for diplomats, many were left frustrated by the lack of leadership and the patchwork of uneven guidance that complicated their ability to fulfill their duties. Further compounding these challenges was President Trump's disdainful statements about diplomats in the midst of the pandemic. During a COVID-19 White House task force press briefing, President Trump referred to the diplomats working hard on behalf of Americans as the, quote, "deep state department," unquote, without any pushback from the secretary, Pompeo, who is standing next to the president. The mistreatment of our nation's diplomats, who have risked their lives on the front lines to keep Americans safe during the COVID-19 pandemic, is just the latest example of the mismanagement by the Trump administration and its chaotic side effects. As this report describes, despite the many benefits these diplomatic professionals provide to the United States, the Trump administration has left the State Department reeling from an unprecedented lack of leadership and demoralized from intentional attacks on its professional integrity. Chapter 1. Vacant Posts and Frequent Turnover, an America Less Present and Less Effective. Quote, "You know how we don't win wars without soldiers. We don't win foreign policy, and we don't maintain America's global leadership without diplomats," unquote. Ambassador Barbara Stevenson, President, American Foreign Service Association. The State Department's work is critical to ensuring American safety and prosperity. Vacancies in senior leadership posts hamper the department's ability to carry out its mission and engage in effective diplomacy. Yet, under this administration, the president has been slow or failed altogether to nominate individuals for dozens of senior posts. Through 2 secretaries of state, and despite numerous commitments to fill key positions, vacancies and acting officials at the department have persisted. 3.5 years into the administration, 11 assistant secretary or undersecretary posts, more than 1/3 are vacant or filled by acting officials. Of those positions, all but 3 had no named nominees by the administration at the time of publication. The basic responsibility of filling key posts has been plagued by a combination of a White House that is slow to nominate, frequent turnover, and, often, poor vetting of candidates. As an illustrative example, it took the administration 11 months to submit the first nomination for Undersecretary for Arms Control. Then, following a controversy over that confirmed official's failure to disclose key information, which may have revealed a counterintelligence threat, she departed in late 2019. It took another 6 months for the White House to propose a replacement, a nominee who had languished in the Senate for a different undersecretary position, due to his role in controversial policies in a prior administration and his failure to be forthcoming with the Senate about that role. As a result, the senior position responsible for negotiating with Russia and other nuclear powers on arms control and leads the U.S. policy on nonproliferation, has been vacant or led by an acting official for 2 of the 3.5 years of this administration. The Senate-confirmed Assistant Secretary for Europe and Eurasian Affairs departed in February 2019. As of July 2020, the administration has yet to nominate someone to fill that role. The Assistant Secretary for Arms Control, Verification, and Compliance, who works with partners to control the threat of weapons of mass destruction, had a Senate-confirmed official for just over 1 year and has been vacant since June 2019, with no subsequent nominee. The Undersecretary for Public Diplomacy and Public Affairs, which leads the department's public outreach and messaging, has been vacant since March 2018, with no nominee. There has been no confirmed Assistant Secretary for South and Asian Affairs for the entire Trump administration, a position that manages relations with India and Pakistan, and a region where the U.S. is engaged in a long-standing war. As of July 2020, more than half of senior department positions have been filled by someone other than a Senate-confirmed official at least once. Vacancies and acting posts have had serious ramifications for America's presence in the world, its overseas operations, and for U.S. national security. Senior leadership positions, such as assistant secretaries, are essential to formulating, implementing, and coordinating U.S. foreign policy. They drive international economic policy, oversee conflict prevention, and represent the United States in bilateral and multilateral negotiations on weapons nonproliferation, global health, and other critical matters. When they are filled with officials serving in an acting capacity, those officials have diminished authority, both within the department and with foreign counterparts. When the positions are vacant, the work of the entire Bureau suffers and slows. Further, 1/4 of senior positions across the department have turned over at least once since 2017. Others serve in dual-hatted roles. Dr. Deborah Birx, tapped to lead the federal COVID-19 response for the White House Coronavirus Task Force, also technically serves as the lead for the State Department's global HIV/AIDS response. Deputy Secretary Stephen Biegun still serves as the lead negotiator for North Korea. Before he ended his tenure as ambassador to Germany, Rick Grenell served simultaneously as the special envoy for Serbia and Kosovo peace negotiations and as acting director of national intelligence, ostensibly holding all 3 positions at once. Slow to fill the ranks. Whether by design or neglect, from the outset, President Trump placed little value on filling some of the senior-most national security and foreign policy positions. The White House was slow to fill posts across the administration, and by many accounts, lacked the traditional transition plans to enable it to be fully staffed quickly. As of October 2017, President Trump had nominated only 56 ambassadors, compared with 81 from the same point in the Obama administration. Key ambassador postings remained without a nominee, including Egypt, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Australia. As of October 2017, out of 22 assistant secretary positions, 20 were either vacant or filled in an acting capacity, and of those, only 3 had nominations pending before the Senate. By November 2017, roughly half of the more than 150 Senate-confirmed positions at the State Department still had no named nominee. By early 2018, just over a year into the administration, the numbers were not much better. As of February 2018, 8 of 22 assistant secretary positions were vacant or held by those in an acting capacity, with no nominee, including American Affairs, South and Central Asian Affairs, Western Hemisphere Affairs, and Near Eastern Affairs. While the administration has repeatedly tried to blame the lack of Senate-confirmed officials on the Senate and the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, the Senate has moved forward dozens of nominees, particularly those that are adequately vetted and qualified. The Senate has confirmed more than 190 nominees to the State Department under the Trump administration. More than half of those were advanced by the Senate Foreign Relations Committee after April 2018. Further, the committee has continuously moved forward nominees promptly who have been appropriately vetted and who meet the standards for Senate confirmation. In 2019, for example, the committee reviewed and advanced nearly 30 nominees in less than 40 days. Many nominations take longer to advance for a variety of reasons. Nominees frequently take 1 month or longer to submit required confirmation paperwork. The committee has had to compensate for the administration's failure to fully vet candidates, adding to review time, and particularly under this administration, the occurrence of missing or incorrect information, as well as disqualifying conduct by the candidates, has considerably slowed the pace of the committee's ability to process nominees. Key posts neglected, and an interim team on the field. A number of the vacancies that President Trump failed to fill left holes in the U.S. presence around the globe. For example, even as the administration argued that we were entering a new era of great power competition with China, and despite an ongoing war in Afghanistan, there were no Assistant Secretary nominees for East or South and Central Asia until December 2017 and January 2019. At a time of unprecedented challenges from Russia, China, and ISIS in Africa, the administration did not name a nominee to serve as Assistant Secretary for African Affairs until May 2018. In the face of a worsening humanitarian crisis in Venezuela, increasing irregular migration from Central America, and heightening tensions with Mexico, President Trump failed to nominate an Assistant Secretary for Western Hemisphere Affairs until March 2018, more than 400 days into the administration. Other vacancies appeared to reflect the administration's lack of interest in advancing certain policy priorities, including having Senate-confirmed officials to lead the U.S. engagement on climate and environmental issues. Consistent with President Trump's disregard for climate change and environmental issues, he did not nominate anyone to serve as Undersecretary for Economic Growth, Energy, and the Environment until January 2019. At his nomination hearing in April 2018, then nominee for Secretary of State Mike Pompeo acknowledged that, quote, "At the State Department, there are too many holes, too many vacancies, too many unfilled positions. When that happens, everyone is stretched thin in the subject matter expertise that we need to deliver America's diplomacy around the world, to conduct its mission, its humanitarian missions, its development missions. Each of the missions which are entrusted to the State Department require talented people on station, doing their part, working alongside it." Unquote. Yet, despite his recognition of how vacant posts hamper the department's effectiveness, under Secretary Pompeo's leadership, the administration has continued to struggle to nominate qualified individuals, and once they have people in place, to keep key posts filled. By October 2018, the White House still had failed to nominate anyone for 5 of 37 key senior Senate-confirmed State Department leadership positions, and more than 24 ambassadorial posts. In late 2018, more than 25 countries, including Egypt, Libya, Mexico, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Thailand, had no ambassadorial nominees. At the end of 2018, only 2 of 6 undersecretary positions were filled by Senate-confirmed officials. By mid-2019, the administration had failed to nominate individuals or fill vacancies for at least 28 Senate-confirmed positions, including 16 ambassadorial posts. Among those were the head of South and Central Asian Affairs, for which the administration's nominee withdrew, the Assistant Secretary for Europe and Eurasian Affairs, the State Department's most senior Europe official, which had not had a Senate-confirmed official since February 2019, and ambassadors to Estonia, Georgia, and Ukraine, 3 countries on the front line in the fight against Russian aggression. Key positions have been filled by non-Senate-confirmed officials for extended periods. As of mid-2020, the Bureau of International Organization Affairs has been led by officials in an acting capacity for more than a year and a half. The Bureau of South and Central Asian Affairs has been led by non-Senate-confirmed officials for almost 3.5 years. As of the time of publication, more than 20 posts, including 2 undersecretaries, 6 assistant secretaries, the Inspector General, and more than 12 ambassadors, are vacant and have no nominee. As of July 2020, there is no Senate-confirmed ambassador and no nominee for Afghanistan, Germany, Honduras, or Qatar. Others have gone long stretches without a nominee. Panama went 2 years without an ambassador, until a nominee was named in May 2020. Ukraine, on the front lines of Kremlin aggression, has not had a Senate-confirmed ambassador since April 2019. The cumulative effect spills into U.S. engagement abroad and impacts our relationships with host nations, when, due to a vacancy, only an acting official without the rank of ambassador is available. Foreign officials may forego a bilateral meeting, rather than meet with someone who they perceive lacks the authority to make decisions and the backing of the president or secretary. Without ambassadors and other senior officials selected by the president, confirmed by the Senate, and representing the administration with full authority, the relationship, and America's leverage, suffers. As former U.S. Ambassador to the United Arab Emirates Barbara Leaf noted, quote, places like Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Egypt are very status-conscious societies. Say you have a problem in Turkey. Who can pick up the phone and call Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan? A good ambassador can do that. A chargé, the second-in-command at the embassy, can't. Unquote. Hiring freeze compounded staffing gaps. The department's ability to fill posts was made even more difficult by the administration's ill-considered hiring freeze, put in place for all of the federal government in January 2017, but remaining in place until May 2018 at the State Department. The freeze, on top of the significant vacancies, has reverberated through the department and continued to pose hiring challenges. The freeze prevented the department from hiring or promoting civil service employees or locally employed embassy staff, resulting in a 7% decline in civil service workforce and a 20% decline in local embassy staff over the course of the freeze, who are critical in carrying out overseas functions and missions. A State Department Inspector General (OIG) review found that the freeze hampered core functions, including providing services to U.S. citizens abroad, and adversely impacted their ability to maintain embassy security. The OIG reported that several bureaus charged with protecting security, health, and life safety reported to OIG that the hiring freeze had significant detrimental effects on their operations. For example, the Bureau of Overseas Buildings Operations reported that it conducted 22% fewer overseas safety, health, and environmental management inspections in 2018 than in 2016 due to the freeze-related staffing shortages. A stunning 96% of embassies and consulates and 95% of bureaus and offices responding to the OIG reported that the freeze had a negative effect on their overall operations. Several bureaus and overseas posts noted negative effects on employee welfare stemming from the hiring freeze, including an excessive workload leading to staff burnout. A separate review of the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor revealed that the hiring freeze hindered its ability to adequately respond to increased workload, including on the Bureau's critical role in Leahy vetting, the screening of U.S. security assistance recipients to prevent funds from going to security forces that have committed gross violations of human rights. Another separate review found that the Bureau of Counterterrorism was unable to establish and fill 4 positions at the Office of Terrorist Detentions for more than 2 years, in part due to the hiring freeze. In late 2019, the Bureau reported that more than 20% 20 out of 92 of its civil servant positions were vacant, owing partly due to backlogs in hiring carried over from the hiring freeze, despite the fact that the freeze had ended approximately 18 months earlier. As of December 2018, the Bureau of Human Resources estimated it would take approximately 2 years to fill civil service vacancies created by the freeze. Loss of expertise. In addition to vacant and acting positions, the department has witnessed a number of departures during the first 3.5 years of the Trump administration, including some of the most experienced career personnel, as well as those in mid-level positions who had yet to climb into leadership ranks. Many career officials or second-in-command who would have traditionally been promoted to a senior position or ambassadorship have instead left or felt forced out. Particularly in the first 2 years of the Trump administration, a number of senior officials departed, whether by choice due to policy disagreements or because they were sidelined and not offered other senior roles. Following a series of expected but abrupt departures in the first few days of the administration, additional senior departments followed during the subsequent months and years, including the Undersecretary for Political Affairs Tom Shannon, who served until June 2018, U.S. Ambassador to Mexico Roberta Jacobson, who served until May 2018, Special Envoy to the Global Coalition to Counter the Islamic State of Iraq Brett McGurk, who served until December 2018, among others. As former Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs Nicholas Burns and former U.S. Ambassador to Iraq and Afghanistan Ryan Crocker lamented, such departures amounted to the, quote, most significant departure of diplomatic talent in generations, unquote. The department has also lost early and mid-career staff at alarming levels. Between July 2017 and June 2018, 722 full-time non-seasonal employees left, about 7% of the department's total staff, and the 4th highest rate among major agencies. Some left because they felt they could no longer defend U.S. policies, and were, as a former Foreign Service officer wrote in a public op-ed, quote, struggling to explain to foreign peoples the blatant contradictions at home, unquote. Others found a particular breaking point or policy decision they no longer felt they could implement. The removal and turnover of Deputy Chiefs of Mission, DCMs, in particular has been notable. DCMs are vital to a well-functioning embassy, possessing years of diplomatic experience and regional expertise. As second in command of a diplomatic mission, they are responsible for the day-to-day management and are expected to help ensure continuity and leadership. DCMs have been dismissed or reassigned at U.S. embassies in Canada, Iceland, Romania, France, the United Kingdom, and South Africa. In one extreme example, the U.S. ambassador to Iceland, in place for just over a year, has had 7 DCMs. The rate at which DCMs are being removed, and the reasoning behind the removals, has created cause for concern. The DCM for U.S. Embassy London, for example, was dismissed following a speech he gave in which he had positively mentioned President Barack Obama, an offense for which the ambassador reportedly called the DCM a traitor. Eric Rubin, president of the American Foreign Service Association, stated that the removal of DCMs is becoming an epidemic. In the process, the department lost significant institutional knowledge and substantive experience. By the end of 2017, the Foreign Service Officer Corps had lost 60% of its career ambassadors, the department's most knowledgeable and experienced professionals. By early 2018, there was only a single senior career official with the department equivalent of a 4-star general, down from 6 at the end of 2016. As Ambassador Barbara Stevenson, then president of the American Foreign Service Association, said pointedly, quote, "Were the U.S. military to face such a decapitation of its leadership ranks, I would expect a public outcry," unquote. The damage was also done to early and mid-career employees. One former Foreign Service officer noted, quote, "The growing exodus of entry-level and mid-level officers who take with us ground-level expertise, that is difficult to replace," unquote. The departure of senior experienced experts means that there are more junior employees who lack senior mentorship. Nancy McEldowney, a former ambassador who retired in June 2019 after a 30-year career in the Foreign Service, observed, quote, "There's a vacuum throughout the State Department, and the junior people now working in these top jobs lack the confidence and credibility that comes from a presidential nomination and Senate confirmation," unquote. According to the resignation letter of one career Foreign Service officer, the Trump administration's stinging disrespect for the department's diplomatic work drove away experienced and talented staff. Others similarly described a complete and utter disdain for our expertise and a contempt for career employees. Many diplomats and career employees were asking if their service is still valued. Conclusion. The lack of senior department officials and personnel attrition levels doesn't just mean empty desks. It translates to a lack of U.S. leadership on a global stage. If senior officials are unable to engage with counterparts, with allies and adversaries alike, in the field, in global hotspots, or in meeting rooms of multilateral organizations, there is a slow degradation of America's global leadership. As former Undersecretary of State under President George W. Bush, R. Nicholas Burns said, quote, "The United States is at the center of every crisis around the world, and you simply cannot be effective if you don't have assistant secretaries and ambassadors in place. It shows a disdain for diplomacy," unquote. Put another way, as former ambassador to Qatar, Dana Shell Smith, said, quote, "Having so many vacancies in essential places is a disaster waiting to happen," unquote. Indeed, other countries have noticed the disempowerment of the State Department under President Trump. For example, former Foreign Minister of Ukraine, Vadim Prystaiko, reminisced in a November 2019 interview about the level of interaction with the United States that had existed under former Assistant Secretary of State for Europe and Eurasia, Victoria Nuland. Prystaiko said, quote, "I think we need to go back to the format that was under Nuland, when she had the full power of the State Department behind her," unquote. In another notable example, also in November 2019, Publimento Colombia released audio of Colombia's ambassador to the United States, Francisco Santos, and Colombia's foreign minister-designate, Claudia Blum. In offering advice about navigating the Washington power structure, Ambassador Santos said, quote, "The U.S. State Department, which used to be important, is destroyed. It doesn't exist," unquote. The State Department's lack of senior-level leadership with Senate confirmation vested authority and legitimacy, coupled with the hollowing out of its ranks at all levels, exacerbates a declining diplomatic network from President Trump's harmful leadership. When the United States does not lead diplomatically, it weakens America's ability to pursue U.S. national interests and promote American values abroad. Chapter 2. The Trump administration's record on diplomatic nominees, repeated vetting failures, poor judgment. Quote, unqualified political appointees have been with us long before Donald Trump. As in so many areas, what he's done is accelerated that problem and made it a lot worse. Unquote. Former Deputy Secretary of State William Burns. American diplomats are given tremendous responsibility by our government. With a few exceptions, they are in charge of all U.S. government employees in their host country, often numbering in the hundreds. Ambassadors are America's face to the world. They represent the United States and are responsible for protecting and advancing our national interests with foreign governments, societies, and international organizations. It is for this reason that our nation's founders saw fit to specify in the Constitution that, while presidents nominate ambassadors, they can only serve with the advice and consent of the Senate. Senior department officials oversee the execution of programs worth millions, and sometimes billions of dollars. They lead skilled groups of professionals that have dedicated their careers to serving the American people. They help shape and drive U.S. foreign policy. If these individuals do not have the temperament to manage a team of diverse employees, or the decorum to interact with officials in a foreign country, they should not be selected for the job. If they have offensive conduct, statements, or associations in their past, they should be disqualified from representing the United States. Yet, too many of President Trump's nominees for senior State Department positions and ambassadorial posts have shown themselves to be unequal to the task. Some have misled Congress during their nomination process. Some have made statements that do not reflect American values. Others have behaved in ways that do not befit a person of significant power and public trust. While it is true that every administration has its share of questionable appointments, the Trump administration's choices have gone beyond the pale, jeopardizing the department's ability to safeguard our nation's interests. This chapter recounts an illustrative group of such nominations. These examples are by no means exhaustive, nor do they capture the full scope of the challenges to the proper stewardship of American foreign policy that the administration's nominees present. With each unfit nominee, the administration sends a clear message that responsible leadership, sound judgment, and experience are not a prerequisite for serving in a senior national security position, that career employees are not deserving of fair treatment, that diplomacy is not worthy of the best America has to offer. Lowering the bar. The Senate has a constitutionally mandated role to consider presidential nominees for advice and consent. The Senate's role is to ensure that presidential nominees are sufficiently qualified and suited for the positions to which they have been nominated. Ambassadors, for example, should, quote, possess clearly demonstrated competence to perform the duties of a chief of mission, unquote. While this and past administrations have often filled certain ambassadorships with individuals selected due to political affiliation, nominees should still meet certain minimum standards of qualification, character, and moral fitness. The White House is supposed to serve as a gatekeeper to ensure that only qualified, experienced, and honest individuals have the honor of representing our nation abroad. Instead, the Trump administration has largely abdicated this responsibility and nominated individuals who would have been eliminated from consideration by previous White Houses and whom prior presidents would not have submitted to the Senate for advice and consent. Either intentionally or negligently, the Trump administration has substantially lowered the entry requirements for foreign relations nominees. Some have submitted files to the committee that are so rife with errors and omissions, it appears they are not taking the process or the position seriously. Others have failed or refused to disclose details about their background, such as lawsuits and serious complaints, that bear on their fitness for Senate confirmation, despite the fact that reviewing details of a nominee's background is a key component of the nomination process. Others are nominated by the White House despite having made offensive and vicious public statements that have no place in our government, much less foreign diplomacy. One Republican Senate office even sarcastically invited a nominee to, quote, put on his tinfoil hat and visit our office with evidence for his salacious conspiracy theories and cuckoo allegations, unquote. While that particular nomination stalled in the Senate, Other nominees have been confirmed by a Senate majority intent on putting President Trump's nominees in place, no matter the damage and cost. Many have continued to serve in senior department posts, even after concerns about their past conduct or statements were raised during the nomination process. These vetting failures have meant that under the Trump administration, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, particularly members and staff of the minority, have dedicated significantly more resources than in the past to ensuring that nominees meet certain minimum standards and do not jeopardize the reputation or security of the United States. Misrepresenting prior experience. The nomination of Mina Chang to be the Assistant Ambassador for Asia at the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, is a case study for how little vetting the Trump administration appears to do of its own senior officials. Chang, with scant development, management, or budget experience, was nominated to a position that oversees a billion-dollar portfolio and more than 1,000 employees. In April 2019, while awaiting confirmation, Chang was appointed to serve in the State Department as a Deputy Assistant Secretary in the Bureau of Conflict and Stability Operations, a senior position just one level below those requiring Senate confirmation. During the vetting process, Senate Foreign Relations Committee staff raised a number of questions about Chang's suitability for the USAID position, including whether her use of funds connected to a nonprofit she had run was appropriate. In addition, in November 2019, NBC News reported that Chang had embellished her resume with misleading claims about her professional background. For example, Chang had reportedly inflated her educational achievements and exaggerated the scope of her nonprofit's work. She also claimed that she held a position on a United Nations panel that did not exist, falsely claimed she had addressed both the Democratic and Republican national conventions, and implied she had testified before Congress when she had not. Chang had also claimed that a Time magazine cover with her face on it was a result of recognition for her nonprofit work, when in fact the cover was fake. Neither the administration nor Chang responded to requests from the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations for documents and details about Chang's use of her nonprofit's funds, but the administration withdrew her nomination following those requests. 6 days after public reporting on her misrepresented credentials, Chang resigned from her Deputy Assistant Secretary position. Yet, until her resignation, she was serving as a senior State Department official, reportedly with a top-secret clearance that gave her access to sensitive intelligence, arguably making her vulnerable to blackmail by any foreign intelligence service that may have bothered to research her credentials. Misleading the Senate about matters under federal investigation. The administration withdrew the nomination of Kathleen Troya KT McFarland from the Senate after she appeared to mislead the Senate Foreign Relations Committee about her knowledge of the Trump transition team's contacts with Russian officials. McFarland had worked closely with former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, who pleaded guilty in December 2017 to lying to the FBI about his interactions with then Russian Ambassador Sergei I. Kislyak. In response to a question by Senator Booker about whether McFarland had ever spoken with Flynn about Flynn's contacts with Kislyak, McFarland responded that she was, quote, not aware of any of the issues or events described, unquote. However, emails obtained by the New York Times in December 2017 indicated otherwise. Further, Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 U.S. presidential election found that McFarland and Flynn discussed sanctions before the phone call, and that, quote, they both understood that Flynn would relay a message to Kislyak in hopes of making sure the situation would not get out of hand, unquote. In a public interview in 2020, McFarland further contradicted her statements to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee when she said that she, quote, talked to General Flynn before he had this phone call. I talked to him right afterwards. He told me what he was going to say. He told me what he said, unquote. Offensive, extremist, and racist actions. A number of Trump administration nominees have been nominated for ambassadorships despite a history of making statements that, in previous administrations, would serve as an automatic disqualifier for any senior diplomatic post. Nonetheless, several such nominees have been confirmed over Democratic objections. Prior to being nominated to serve as the U.S. ambassador to Barbados, Leandro Rizzuto Jr. made a number of statements advancing fringe conspiracy theories and attacking President Trump's political opponents. During the 2016 presidential campaign, Rizzuto used his Twitter account to launch and amplify vicious and unfounded attacks on Trump's rivals, including insults against their family members and sexist comments about spouses. Some of his false and derogatory claims were against U.S. senators, including some who sit on the committee responsible for reviewing his nomination. First nominated in January 2018, Mr. Rizzuto's nomination did not move forward due to bipartisan opposition. The administration re-nominated him in 2019. His nomination was sent back twice to the White House by the Senate. The administration did not give up, however. In May 2020, the administration appointed him as the most senior official at the U.S. consulate in Bermuda, clearly circumventing the Senate. Kyle McCarter, who was confirmed as U.S. ambassador to Kenya in January 2019, tweeted on election night 2016, quote, "Hillary for prison. No, really," unquote. At his confirmation hearing, when asked about the tweet, he replied, quote, "You know, there is a hype in an election that we make, and we question. And I did pose the question. And perhaps that was not called for. But I will tell you, I did pose the question," unquote. Pressed further, McCarter said, quote, "Perhaps it is one of those tweets that you would like to reel in, but you cannot. And that was one of those," unquote. As ambassador, McCarter continued his offensive social media posts, tweeting about the quote-unquote Wuhan flu, a racially and ethnically stigmatizing term for the COVID-19 pandemic pushed by the Trump administration, drawing fierce criticism and raising concerns about the potential to further inflame already documented rising racial tension and discrimination against Asians in Kenya. Before being confirmed as U.S. ambassador to Slovenia, Linda Blanchard shared articles on Facebook that made false claims about Democratic politicians. She once shared an article titled, quote, "The Clinton body count expands. 5 mysterious deaths in the last 6 weeks," unquote. On Election Day 2016, Blanchard posted on Facebook, quote, "May God our Father paint this country red with the blood of Jesus," unquote. President Trump's nominees have also attempted to conceal their participation in past racist actions. In 1994, Trump's nominee for ambassador to Norway, Mark Burkhalter, was involved in the creation of a racist campaign flyer that distorted a photograph of a black politician to darken some of his features, give him a prominent afro, make his lips larger, and warp one of his eyes. According to court filings, Burkhalter delivered the materials for the flyer, directed that it be attributed to a fake political action committee with a fake mailing address, authorized payment for some of its printing costs, and approved its release. Burkhalter was sued for libel, and after nearly a year of court proceedings, settled the lawsuit for a monetary payment and signed a letter of admission taking full responsibility for the flyer. As a result for his involvement with the flyer, Burkhalter faced charges from the Georgia State Ethics Commission. Those proceedings also lasted nearly a year and resulted in Burkhalter signing a consent order that he personally authorized payment for the flyer, failed to properly disclose the payment, and agreed that he violated Georgia law and would pay a civil penalty. Burkhalter's original conduct was reprehensible, but he further demonstrated his lack of fitness to serve as an ambassador by failing to disclose the lawsuit and ethics charges to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Other inappropriate conduct. Nominees who have demonstrated conduct that falls far short of the minimum standards to be a U.S. diplomat have nonetheless received ambassadorial nominations. For instance, Christine Toretti, nominated in May 2018 to serve as U.S. ambassador to Malta, had been subject to a restraining order after she left a bullet-riddled target sheet on an acquaintance's chair. Although the president renominated her in 2019, he did not nominate her again in 2020. Conclusion. These are but a few examples of the poorly vetted, unqualified, and unfit political nominees that President Trump has submitted to the Senate. There are several more whose issues never became public, or who withdrew rather than answer additional questions. Few, if any, of these individuals should be placed in a position of public trust with regards to our nation's security in this or any administration. Notably, however, the president has continued to renominate many of these nominees, despite serious objections from both Democratic and Republican senators, only further contributing to vacancies in Senate-confirmed officials for months on end. In some cases, those who are confirmed but ill-suited for management contribute to a work environment that has driven away talented and dedicated staff, putting the well-being of the department's workforce at risk. When the Trump administration fails to vet its nominees properly or intentionally ignores red flags, the American people pay the price. When individuals with stained records project our national image abroad, our country is worse off. And when our national security is entrusted to those who, through incompetence and inexperience, cannot protect it, our adversaries benefit. Chapter 3. A Culture of Fear and Mistrust. Attacks on Career Employees. Quote, "If this administration is going to define disagreement as disloyalty, then it is headed toward a ruinous outcome. It will inevitably lead to the death of expertise." Unquote. Ambassador Nancy McEldowney, Retired Director, Foreign Service Institute. The Department of State's Foreign Service and Civil Service officers take an oath to support and defend the Constitution and to well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office that they are entering. These public servants are nonpartisan. They execute the policies of both Democratic and Republican administrations with equal force and to the best of their abilities. It is this core characteristic that ensures they serve the mission and the nation, not one party or president. In return, these career public servants are supposed to receive, quote, "equal opportunity and fair and equitable treatment in employment, without regard to race, color, religion, sex, national origin, age, disability, political affiliation, marital status, or sexual orientation," unquote. These factors are to play no role in personnel decisions, which should be based solely on merit. But in the era of President Trump, who has attacked career employees by name, there have been credible reports of political targeting and retaliation against career State Department employees. State Department documents have revealed that as early as April 2017, senior White House and State Department officials had tagged some department employees as leaker, troublemaker, and turncoat. Although some discriminatory and retaliatory measures have occurred by political appointees in lower-level leadership positions, a toxic environment can only flourish when it reflects the culture set at the top. For example, a year-long State Department Inspector General (OIG) investigation found that senior political appointees had also accused employees of being Obama holdovers, traitors, and disloyal based on their perceived political views, and retaliated against them. A subsequent OIG report found that senior political appointees in the Secretary's office removed a career expert before her posting was complete, in part based on perceptions about her political views and ethnic origin. Additional credible and detailed complaints alleged that employees with specialized skills and years of expertise were reassigned or given mundane tasks, such as reviewing and responding to Freedom of Information Act (FOIA) requests, in an effort to sideline them or cut them out from work on specific portfolios. These pernicious practices, compounded with a lack of accountability, have had damaging consequences. Employees, many of them with years of valuable service and experience, have left the department because they found the work environment too hostile. Others have sought refuge in lower-profile jobs where they can avoid political fights and the attention of political appointees. The State Department's Inspector General, until May 2020, Stephen Linick, was an independent and nonpartisan senior career official whose mandate was to hold the department and the Secretary accountable for any misconduct. He oversaw lengthy investigations into political retaliation of career employees and had a reputation for being tough on the prior administration. At the time of his firing, which came the urging of Secretary Pompeo, he was leading an investigation into the potential misuse of resources by the Secretary. Coming amid the removals of 5 other inspectors general in a span of 6 weeks, Linick's firing further demonstrated the Trump administration's contempt for and distrust of those committed to carrying out their responsibilities without regard to politics. In an unusual move, Linick has been replaced by Stephen Achard, a Trump administration political appointee who continues to also serve in his role as head of the Office of Foreign Missions. The administration's disdain and distrust of career public servants. President Trump came into office distrustful of career professionals at the Department of State, whom he termed deep state and believed were against him, simply because they had worked to execute the policies of the previous administration. The idea of loyalists who needed to be purged from federal government began early in the Trump administration, and both of President Trump's secretaries of state looked the other way when career employees alleged that political calculations were affecting personnel decisions. Influential Republicans outside the administration and conservative media promoted the narrative that holdovers must be purged, and that the administration should focus on ousting Obama-Clinton loyalists. Trump's deep state rhetoric and attacks on career employees emboldened political appointees throughout the department to follow through. As retired Ambassador Ronald Newman noted, the politicization of the State Department represents a deliberate destruction, quote, based on the belief that the federal government is hostile, and now you have to put in loyal people across the board in senior positions to control the bastards, the career bureaucrats, unquote. The irony, of course, is that, in the words of a former assistant secretary, it's not in career employees' DNA to disclose State Department matters. Despite what many in Congress and the public see as a series of chaotic and unwise foreign policy decisions, the department's career employees have continued to fulfill the department's mission and do their jobs. Inspector General finds hostile treatment and unmerited accusations of disloyalty. Less than 2 months after Secretary Pompeo was confirmed, it was reported that Mary Stoll, a senior advisor in the International Organization Affairs (IO) Bureau, was vetting career department employees based on their political affiliation and personal views, and compiling a loyalty list of those she believed met her ideological litmus test. According to employees, Stoll reviewed social media pages of career personnel for ideological deviations from President Trump's agenda and researched their work for previous administrations. Those determined untrustworthy were sidelined and kept out of high-level meetings, creating a level of chaos and dysfunction that some officials had never before observed in their long careers. Following numerous congressional inquiries, the State Department's Office of the Inspector General interviewed more than 40 individuals, including current and former senior department officials, such as then Deputy Secretary John Sullivan, then Acting Director General of the Foreign Service William Todd, and then Undersecretary for Political Affairs Thomas Shannon, about the allegations of political retaliation in the IO Bureau. In August 2019, after a 13-month investigation, the OIG concluded there had been, quote, disrespectful and hostile treatment of employees, accusations against and harassment of career employees premised on claims that they were disloyal based on their perceived political views, and retaliation, unquote. According to the OIG's report, quote, numerous employees told OIG that Assistant Secretary of the IO Bureau, Kevin Moley, and Ms. Stoll made inappropriate accusations of disloyalty and made positive or negative comments about employees based on perceived political views, unquote. Stoll, in particular, referred to employees as Obama holdovers, traitors, part of the deep state, and disloyal. Moreover, Assistant Secretary Moley and most of the other senior officials in the Bureau did nothing to address Stoll's reprehensible behavior, with the OIG finding, quote, significant evidence of systemic deficiencies in leadership and management relating to the treatment of career employees, unquote. The OIG's investigation found a culture of hostility and disrespect had permeated the Bureau. The Assistant Secretary and Stoll frequently berated employees and engaged in unprofessional behavior, especially toward junior staff. Employees reported to senior officials that Moley and Stoll cultivated a negative and vindictive environment. According to one employee, working with Stoll involved 6 to 8 hostile interactions per day. Even after department leadership expressed concerns to Assistant Secretary Moley about his conduct, and the department legal advisor counseled Stoll, their treatment of employees did not improve. The environment Stoll and Assistant Secretary Moley fostered in the IO Bureau took a toll on employees. Between March 2018 and August 2019, approximately 50 employees, more than 15% of the total, left the Bureau, with many citing its poor leadership as the reason for their exit. Career employees' removal linked to perceived national origin and political views. IO Bureau employees were not the only ones in the department to experience political targeting and retaliation. In early 2018, reports emerged that employees in the Secretary of State's office had been subject to retaliation leading to congressional inquiries and, in response, a separate investigation by the OIG. In November 2019, the OIG concluded that an employee in the Secretary of State's office had been improperly pushed out based on her national origin and perceptions about her political affiliation. The career State Department employee had started working in the Secretary of State's office in July 2016 on a fixed one-year detail from her home office. In March 2017, a conservative website published an article with a series of false claims about her prior work history and affiliations, referring to her as an Obama aide who had burrowed in the department and was now, quote, running Tehran policy, unquote. Shortly after the article was published, a White House staffer and senior department political appointees began exchanging emails about the employee. One political appointee falsely claimed that the employee had been born in Iran and, citing hearsay, that she had cried when the president won. One appointee forwarded the email chain to Brian Hook, then the Director of Policy Planning under Secretary Tillerson, who responded that the information was helpful, and that, quote, I've emailed friends who've tracked the Iran deal for intel on her and waiting to hear back, unquote. Another senior official, Edward Lacey, who was Hook's deputy and a career official, subsequently wrote to Hook that, quote, with few exceptions, notably me, your immediate predecessors handpicked all of the policy planning staff, including the career civil servants on detail to us, the employee being one of them. Their picks, without exception, were Obama-Clinton loyalists, not at all supportive of President Trump's foreign policy agenda. I succeeded in ousting 5 whose details expired before your arrival, unquote. Not long after Lacey's email, the employee was pushed out of the secretary's office. The OIG's investigation determined that assumptions by administration political appointees, which they did not attempt to verify, about the career employee's perceived political opinions, prior work for the Obama administration as a career employee, and incorrect perceptions about her national origin, quote, played at least some role, unquote, in her early ouster. The OIG concluded that senior political appointees at the department used those factors to cast doubt on her loyalty to the United States and the Trump administration's agenda, and that Hook ultimately made the decision to end the employee's detail early. It also found that Hook did not respond to concerning allegations by the employee that, as a result of the false media coverage, she had received threats and feared for her safety. Hook offered differing rationales for the early dismissal, which the OIG did not find convincing. The OIG did not establish whether Hook took any actions against other career employees, but in April 2017, after a meeting with a staff member on the National Security Council, Derek Harvey, Hook emailed himself a list of notes about career employees, which included notations like a leaker and a troublemaker, and a turncoat next to employee names. Both Hook and Secretary Pompeo objected to the OIG report's conclusions. Hook took the unusual step of writing a rebuttal that he insisted be included in the final OIG report. Secretary Pompeo demanded that IG Linux request an investigation into whether information in a Daily Beast article on the draft report had leaked from Linux office. The report had also been circulated among more than 20 people inside the department for weeks. A subsequent investigation by the Department of Defense's Criminal Investigative Service, quote, found no information indicating that any DOS OIG employee provided information from the report to the Daily Beast prior to the publication of its article, unquote. Department leadership's lack of response to political retaliation. In the time since the allegations of political retaliation became public, the department has largely ignored them or failed to respond. The department refused, for nearly 2 years, to provide documents to congressional committees seeking information about allegations of retaliation, and failed to take any action against senior officials who engaged in retaliation against career employees. Ambassador Michael McKinley, who served as a senior advisor to Secretary Pompeo until October 2019, said that after the release of the August OIG report, quote, it became apparent that the department would not be taking the key corrective actions that many employees had anticipated, unquote. In an internal meeting with department employees, Undersecretary for Political Affairs David Hale and then Deputy Secretary John Sullivan acknowledged that they could have responded to the retaliation allegations earlier. In the end, those who engaged in retaliation escaped official accountability. Even after the OIG's heavily critical August 2019 report, department leadership took no immediate action. Assistant Secretary Moley remained in his leadership position without consequences until he retired in late November 2019. Mary Stoll left the department in December 2018 without being interviewed by the OIG. Lacey retired before the completion of the investigation into retaliation in the Secretary's office. And Brian Hook kept his job as Special Representative for Iran and Senior Advisor to the Secretary. In fact, the only person to suffer career consequences since the OIG investigations was the Inspector General himself, whom President Trump fired at the urging of Secretary Pompeo. The message to the department employees is clear. Wrongdoing by political appointees will not be punished, but those who seek to reveal that wrongdoing should watch their backs. Political attacks on nonpartisan public servants. Attacks on State Department public servants gained a further unwelcome spotlight during the impeachment inquiry into President Trump, in which several career employees testified. Career officials who had served across Democratic and Republican administrations alike suddenly found themselves under a frenzy of attacks as conservative media outlets and senior administration officials, including the president, referred to them as radical unelected bureaucrats and never-Trumpers. Senior department leadership, including Secretary Pompeo, remained silent in the face of these attacks, even as President Trump personally attacked some of the department's most distinguished career officials, including Ambassador Marie Yovanovitch, Ambassador Bill Taylor, and Deputy Assistant Secretary George Kent. Secretary Pompeo also declined to defend Ambassador Yovanovitch when months earlier she was the subject of several false smears by a conservative columnist and others that she was a disloyal Obama holdover, working with George Soros to harm President Trump's campaign and bolster Hillary Clinton in the 2016 election. The false accusations were refuted and dismissed by her colleagues, including then Deputy Secretary Sullivan and Undersecretary David Hale, who went as far to say that no one in the department thought the allegations against Ambassador Yovanovitch were credible. Yet Secretary Pompeo never said a public word in support of one of his senior-most female ambassadors, who had served the department more than 3 decades, including in several hardship posts. Senior leadership also rebuffed repeated attempts by Ambassador Yovanovitch and other department officials to issue a statement defending her against the false claims. It was later revealed that Secretary Pompeo received a large file of disinformation from Rudy Giuliani that contained additional false smears against Ambassador Yovanovitch and other department employees. Secretary Pompeo then instructed his senior officials to review the disinformation packet, which was eventually referred to the OIG. Before impeachment, career employees had already suffered 3 years of mistreatment at the hands of senior leadership and political appointees at the department. Yet the impeachment inquiry demonstrated both a stunning culmination and a new low in the administration's attack against career employees, exacerbating an atmosphere of unease and mistrust at the department. The administration's response to the testimony of diplomats in the impeachment inquiry displayed its contempt for the very notion of a nonpartisan career diplomatic service. It also served as a warning. The president and his administration would viciously attack any career official who reports or testifies about such wrongdoing, thereby further undermining the rule of law. Conclusion. The attacks on career employees threaten more than just a single bureau's effectiveness. They undermine a core tenet of public service, nonpartisanship. Public servants advance the mission of the agency that employs them. They seek to protect and secure the interests of the American people, and above all, they serve to uphold the Constitution. Politically motivated attacks on career public servants do not advance the security of the United States or the American people. They only threaten to further divide and erode confidence in the critical work carried out by the department and its employees. Those that do not stand up and defend the nonpartisan public service do a great disservice to the country. Career public servants should never be subjected to political targeting or other inappropriate or unlawful personnel practices. Secretary Pompeo's so-called ethos statement, which hangs in the lobby of the State Department, includes principles such as serving with unfailing professionalism, acting with uncompromising personal and professional integrity, taking ownership of and responsibility for my actions and decisions, and showing unstinting respect in word and deed for my colleagues. Yet time and again, the President, Secretary Pompeo, and the senior political leadership of the department have acted with contempt towards the department's career employees. Chapter 4. A Crisis of Morale. Quote, "The prevailing mood is low and getting lower, if it can." Unquote. Thomas R. Pickering, 7-time U.S. Ambassador, including to Russia and the UN, under 6 presidents from both parties. The previous chapters have illustrated how extended vacancies, an exodus of expertise, an influx of unqualified nominees, and unaddressed reports of retaliation against career employees have damaged the State Department. It should therefore come as no surprise that morale and confidence in the department's leadership has dropped precipitously since the Trump administration took office in 2017. Employees and former officials have reported that the administration's stinging disrespect for the department's diplomatic work has driven away experienced and talented staff, and that morale is plunging to its lowest level in decades. To quantify the effect of these developments on morale, Senate Foreign Relations Committee Democratic staff reviewed data from employee surveys collected annually by the federal government. Responses to the annual Employee Viewpoint Survey, EVS, are intended to measure employees' perceptions of whether and to what extent conditions characteristic of successful organizations are present in their agencies. These results reveal a steady and significant deterioration of morale, effectiveness, and leadership over the past 3 years, with particularly precipitous declines in several offices and bureaus. Throughout the department, there are serious concerns that coercive partisanship and prohibited personnel practices have run amok, coupled with a starkly declining confidence in senior leadership and doubts about the effectiveness of department operations. This chapter presents some of the more concerning trends reported by the department's employees, results that are not evident in the aggregated department-wide data that the State Department has released, which provide critical and troubling insights into the consequences of corrosive and negligent leadership on our diplomatic corps. It also examines the effect of the Trump administration's response to the renewed focus on racial injustice and systemic racism, which has further exacerbated already low morale as a consequence of the department's ongoing struggle to build a diverse, representative workforce. Office of the Legal Advisor, L. The Office of the Legal Advisor, L, provides advice on all legal issues, whether domestic or international, facing the department. Among their responsibilities, L attorneys help ensure that State Department employees follow the ethics regulations and legal guidelines that give our diplomats authority and credibility when representing America. Recent data indicates that increasing numbers of the State Department's own lawyers believe they cannot disclose suspected violations of laws, rules, and regulations, or are subject to arbitrary action and coercion. This disturbing trend jeopardizes adherence to the rule of law for our foreign policy and national security. Employees responding to the survey reported startling trends from 2016 to 2019, including rising fear of reprisal, a 7-fold increase in the percentage of respondents who felt they could not disclose a suspected violation of law, rule, or regulation without fear of reprisal, from less than 1% in 2016 to more than 7% in 2019. Increased reports of political coercion, a 22-point increase among respondents who reported that arbitrary action, personal favoritism, and coercion for partisan political purposes was tolerated in their bureau, rising from 1% in 2016 to 23% in 2019. Declining confidence in senior leadership, a 34-point increase among those reporting that the department's senior leaders did not maintain high levels of honesty and integrity, rising from 0% in 2016 to 34% in 2019. Rising dissatisfaction, a more than doubling in the percentage of respondents reporting that they were considering leaving their job in the next year, rising from 13% in 2016 to 30% in 2019. Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration, PRM. The Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration, PRM, is responsible for protecting and assisting refugees and vulnerable migrants around the world. It oversees the department's humanitarian assistance efforts, manages refugee admissions to the U.S., and partners with international and nonprofit organizations to carry out these goals. An increased number of PRM staff reported that arbitrary action and personal favoritism was tolerated, and that the Bureau could not recruit people with the right skills to carry out its mission. These concerns are telling for a Bureau whose mission has been severely curtailed by the Trump administration, which has sought to dramatically reduce refugee admissions, and where at least one senior official responsible for that program was sidelined. Employees responding to the survey from PRM Bureau reported concerning trends from 2016 to 2019, including rising fears of arbitrary action and coercion, a more than doubling in the percent of respondents reporting that arbitrary action, personal favoritism, and coercion for partisan political purposes was tolerated, rising from 19% in 2016 to 42% in 2019. Recruitment concerns. A 23-point increase in the percentage of respondents reporting that their work unit could not recruit people with the right skills, rising from 27% in 2016 to 50% in 2019. Declining confidence in senior leadership. An almost tenfold increase in the percentage of respondents reporting that senior leaders did not maintain high standards of honesty and integrity, rising from 3% in 2016 to 29% in 2019. Bureau of Counterterrorism and Countering Violent Extremism, CT. The Bureau of Counterterrorism and Countering Violent Extremism, CT, leads State Department efforts to counter and defeat terrorism around the world, especially through cooperation with our partners and allies. CT employees reported increased concerns about recruitment and lacking sufficient resources, which could hamper our efforts against terrorism affecting Americans both at home and abroad. Employees in CT Bureau reported the following. Less effective operations. A doubling in the percentage of respondents reporting that their work unit is unable to recruit people with the right skills, increasing from 18% in 2016 to 36% in 2019. Declining confidence in senior leadership. A nearly twofold increase in the percentage of respondents who reported that their senior leaders did not generate high levels of motivation and commitment, increasing from 28% in 2016 to 55% in 2019. Bureau of Intelligence and Research, INR. INR is a member of the intelligence community and is responsible for harnessing the nation's intelligence resources to inform U.S. policymakers at the State Department. If INR cannot hire the people with the right skills, senior State Department officials may be operating without the full intelligence picture, leaving them at a disadvantage in interactions with U.S. adversaries and others around the world. Among employees responding in the INR Bureau, less effective operations. A nearly threefold increase in the percentage of respondents reporting that their work unit was not able to recruit people with the right skill set, increasing from 12% in 2016 to 33% in 2019. Declining confidence in senior leadership. An eightfold increase in the percentage of respondents reporting that the department's senior leadership did not maintain high standards of honesty and integrity, rising from 3% in 2016 to 24% in 2019. Bureau of International Organization Affairs, IO. IO staff are responsible for implementing U.S. policy at the United Nations and other multilateral organizations. When other countries share the burden, U.S. policy is made more effective and can be implemented at lower cost. Yet, if IO staff are subject to arbitrary action, personal favoritism, and partisan coercion, that weakens our ability to cooperate and coordinate with partners and allies, making it harder to succeed in executing U.S. policy. Respondents reported the following for the IO Bureau. Rising fears of reprisal and partisanship. A more than doubling in the percentage of respondents reporting that arbitrary action and coercion for partisan political purposes were tolerated, from 24% in 2016 to 53% in 2019. Less effective operations. A nearly tripling in the percentage of respondents reporting that their agency was unsuccessful at accomplishing its mission, increasing from 8% in 2016 to 23% in 2019. Declining confidence in senior leadership. A nearly tripling in the percentage of respondents reporting that senior leaders at the State Department did not maintain high standards of honesty and integrity, increasing from 12% in 2016 to 35% in 2019. A silent morale crisis. Diversity. Already low morale has been exacerbated by the Trump administration's response to the renewed focus on racial injustice and systemic racism. Even before the death of George Floyd in May 2020, State Department employees reported rising concerns about leadership's handling of diversity issues. The employee survey responses show a 16-point increase from 2016 to 2019 in the percentage of employees reporting policies and programs did not promote diversity in the workplace in the Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration. In the Bureau of Intelligence and Research, the percentage of respondents who felt their supervisor was not committed to a workforce representative of all segments of society increased from nearly 0% in 2016 to 10% in 2019. In the Bureau of International Organization Affairs, the percentage of respondents who felt their supervisor didn't work well with employees from different backgrounds doubled from 10% in 2016 to almost 21% in 2019. While the overall proportion of racial and ethnic minorities at state increased from 2002 to 2018, the proportion of African Americans and women at the State Department decreased to lower than pre-2002 levels, even as the State Department workforce grew. Out of 189 ambassadors currently serving overseas, only 4 are Hispanic, and just 3 are African American career diplomats. Hispanic employees and women are underrepresented at the department, representing 7% and 43% of the State Department workforce respectively. In senior leadership, the numbers paint an even more disturbing picture. In 2018, white employees represented 87% of executive leadership, with a 3% decrease in African American leadership from 2002. Racial or ethnic minorities in the civil service were 4% to 29% less likely to be promoted than their white counterparts, even with similar education, occupation, or years in federal service. For the Foreign Service in 2019, a majority of promotions went to white men, 5% went to African Americans, 7% to Hispanics and Asians, 6% to other ethnic minorities, and 36% went to women. Like other federal agencies, State Department employees face sexual harassment and gender discrimination. In addition to the number of gender discrimination claims filed at the department spiking in 2018, underreporting and fear of career derailment for coming forward with harassment and discrimination allegations continue to plague the department. The intersection of race and gender are acute at the department, where black women employees decreased from 13% in 2002 to 9% in 2018 and are at the highest risk of experiencing sexual harassment. Politically motivated retaliation and reprisal remain a concern, especially among diplomats from historically underrepresented backgrounds. In at least one instance, an Indian American diplomat, before she resigned, was told that she and an African American colleague were blocked from senior leadership assignments because they did not pass the quote-unquote Breitbart test and were not deemed to be sufficiently politically loyal toward President Trump. In a further sign of the fear-based climate at a department reeling from Secretary Pompeo's refusal to back department employees testifying in the impeachment inquiry, career officials who described to the press their frustration and concern on issues of race and diversity in the diplomatic corps only spoke on the condition of anonymity, for fear of retaliation or endangering their careers. As non-white, non-male diplomats face their own professional struggles in attempting to advance their careers at the department, they also bear the additional burden of espousing American ideals to other nations as America and the State Department struggle to confront injustice at home. Beyond the challenges of experiencing harassment from foreign citizens, foreign government officials, and at times, even other U.S. government officials based on their skin color, gender, and qualities other than the content of their character, diplomats of color have also expressed a lack of support from their supervisors and department leadership. While diversity issues at the department long predate the Trump administration, they are exacerbated by the administration's continued inflammatory and xenophobic response to racial and ethnic issues. In the first 5 months of the Trump administration, the department's 3 most senior African American career officials and the top-ranking Hispanic official were removed or resigned from their positions. Given President Trump's racially insensitive comments labeling African nations and Haiti as quote-unquote shithole countries, moral equivocations after a white supremacist murdered an anti-racist protester in Charlottesville, and continued disparagement of Mexicans, Muslims, and other diverse groups of Americans, it comes as no surprise that he stands out from his 4 predecessors for only nominating 1 African American female ambassador 2.5 years into his term. More recently, some African American diplomats have become so dejected by the administration's belittling response to worldwide protests against racial injustice, triggered by a spate of police killings of African Americans, including Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, that they are considering quitting the Foreign Service. One African American official said, quote, "I think that a lot of Foreign Service officers of color, particularly black officers, are at a point where they're just fed up. We're dissatisfied. We feel dehumanized. And I think enough is enough. There is an issue of diversity, recruitment, and retention that they've not taken seriously." Unquote. For more than 2 weeks after the outbreak of protests, diplomats looked to Secretary Pompeo for guidance on how to address the protests to their foreign counterparts and reassurance about the department's efforts to address racial injustice. Yet, instead, it fell to Deputy Secretary Vacant to send messages to the department's employees, causing frustration about Pompeo's delegation of such a highly sensitive issue. Other diplomats felt abandoned, as they faced questions from their counterparts around the world and waited for a statement addressing racial inequality in the U.S. and the department from Secretary Pompeo. In comparison, several top military officers issued videos and statements to their respective branches, addressing Mr. Floyd's death, diversity, and racism, reinforcing American values, and expressing solidarity with affected staff. 16 days after Floyd's death, Secretary Pompeo sent a department-wide email emphasizing the need to combat quote-unquote propaganda from the autocratic societies about human rights in America, in a move fiercely criticized by many department employees as too little too late, embarrassing, disappointing, and out of touch from the reality department employees were facing. A week later, the department's only African-American Assistant Secretary of State and a Trump appointee, Mary Elizabeth Taylor, resigned based on the Trump administration's response to racial injustice and the protests. In a familiar scenario that has played out time and again during the Trump administration, Secretary Pompeo's deafening silence and failure to stand up for department employees and issue statements of unequivocal support to and for his employees has baffled and disappointed department employees. Secretary Pompeo's leadership vacuum left diplomats freewheeling, issuing their own statements addressing racial injustice and reassuring colleagues, offering unintentionally disjointed messages to their foreign counterparts, questioning the department's true commitment to diversity, and struggling to maintain America's credibility in the world. The frustration of career diplomats with senior leadership and the lack of diversity, equity, and inclusion at the department, exacerbated by President Trump and his nominees, is ongoing. As recently as July 2020, reports surfaced of cringeworthy racist and sexist comments that the U.S. ambassador to the United Kingdom, Robert Woody Johnson, made to the London embassy staff. Ambassador Johnson reportedly made disparaging comments about minorities and women on a weekly, if not daily, basis that diplomats found deeply offensive and demoralizing. Additionally, Ambassador Johnson would hold official meetings and events at a men-only venue, excluding women, before another diplomat warned him to stop. In stark contrast to the department's leadership silence in the face of false smear campaigns and unmerited attacks against career employees, the department offered a full-throated defense of Ambassador Johnson, stating, quote, "We stand by Ambassador Johnson and look forward to him continuing to ensure our special relationship with the UK is strong," unquote. The department's quick defense of Ambassador Johnson is emblematic of the department's willingness to protect President Trump's allies, even at the expense of career employees who may be facing toxic leadership and hostile work environments. Measurable damage to integrity, leadership, and workplace culture. The responses and views by employees shown in the EVS surveys provide valuable, yet disturbing insights. They show the pernicious effect of a culture in which loyalists are rewarded and career public servants are viewed with suspicion and sidelined. They demonstrate that a sense of inclusion and belonging as an American diplomat is frayed. They give credence to the increased workload and burnout resulting from staff attrition and lack of faith in leadership. And they indicate that far too many employees are working in a culture of fear and survival, not support and professional development. While resignation letters and EVS survey responses offer hints as to the reasons the department is hemorrhaging talent it has spent years investing in, the State Department's annual score in the Partnership for Public Services Best Place to Work agency ranking offers another clue. The mass exodus of senior and mid-level leadership and a drop in interest of joining the Foreign Service coincides with a large drop in the department's ranking of workplace culture and sinking morale levels. After consistently ranking as one of the top 5 large federal government agencies to work for since 2012, the State Department fell from a ranking of 4 in 2016 to 8 in 2017 after the Trump presidential transition. After a year of Trump administration leadership, the department's ranking dropped even more in 2018, from 8 to 14. The results of these surveys should be a concern for all Americans. If public servants who carry out our national security and foreign policy are working in fear, feel demoralized, and feel unable to report violations of law, our safety and security is endangered. When department leadership is silent and deferential to a president who puts personal gain above national security and at every turn undermines the ability of our diplomats to represent the United States, the basic functions of diplomacy and our foreign policy are compromised. Many of these concerning trends started under Secretary Tillerson, but have worsened under Secretary Pompeo, despite Secretary Pompeo's commitment to bring quote-unquote swagger back to the department. Moreover, as the data reflects responses through July 2019, it does not reflect the further reported drops in morale during the House impeachment inquiry due to attacks on career employees, made worse by the department's failure to defend them. Rising fears of retaliation and partisanship, less effective operations, declining confidence in senior leadership, and rising dissatisfaction throughout the State Department have resulted in an exodus of senior staffers with decades of experience that is taking a startling and measurable toll on American foreign relations. A weakened State Department means a weakened America in the global arena. The results of these surveys show that the current trajectory is a demoralized department that feels less supported, less secure, and therefore less able to fulfill its mission. Chapter 5. Conclusion and Recommendations. The Challenges Ahead. The Trump administration's disdain for diplomacy and neglect of the State Department have created unprecedented challenges for U.S. diplomats and the department's public servants. Senior positions have remained vacant. Career employees have been attacked and their work devalued by the department's leadership. Inappropriate politicization of the department and its resources continues to fester. Experienced civil servants and foreign service officers have been driven from serving their nation, leaving gaping holes in our nation's diplomatic and national security capabilities. Even in the best of times, the work facing the nation's diplomatic corps is formidable. Today, the State Department is on the front lines battling a global pandemic, while their own country's response is failing. Diplomats are promoting human rights and justice abroad, while our own country's shortcomings and our ongoing struggle with systemic racism are painfully evident. They seek to negotiate peace in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria, while the White House actively dismisses intelligence critical for safeguarding American lives. The department is implementing policy for a new era of strategic competition with Russia and China, while President Trump willingly undermines U.S. national security in favor of his own personal and political interests. Maintaining their integrity as diplomats when U.S. credibility on the global stage is waning, and the president undermines them with a simple tweet, is a daunting task. While some of the challenges identified in this report are not new, the State Department has long faced systemic institutional challenges. The Trump administration, by design or inattention, has pushed the department to the brink of failure and collapse. It is in this crisis, however, that we also have an opportunity to change course and re-examine the department's structure and norms. Current and future White House and departmental leadership will need to address these challenges with genuine and sustained effort. If the current trajectory continues, we will be at risk of losing the Department of State as a functioning tool for our national security and foreign policy. While some may applaud this as draining the swamp, there can be no question that Americans will pay a price for such a loss in our security, safety, and prosperity. The nation needs to decide what kind of State Department it wants, one that carries out foreign policy based on the expertise and experience of those who serve our country, or one that caters to the personal, political, and financial interests of a president or secretary of state to the detriment of U.S. national security. Congress, as our Article I branch of government, has a vital role in changing the current trajectory. Congress must craft and pass comprehensive legislation to revitalize the Department of State, strengthen protections for our diplomats, and rebuild a battered workforce. Such legislation must also enhance transparency and accountability at the State Department. A strong, principled, and ethically sound State Department leadership, devoted first and foremost to the department's mission, is also critical in shouldering this burden. All department leadership must protect career personnel from the political whims of any White House, and at every moment defend against the weaponization of the department and its resources for political ends. Leadership must address mismanagement and misconduct at the department swiftly, and hold political appointees to the same high standards expected of career employees. Changing the current trajectory will also require a more engaged civil society, and, in particular, an active and vocal cadre of former department and national security officials. If the past few years have shown anything, it is that the burden on career public servants is too heavy. They alone cannot ensure that our government adheres to the rule of law and upholds national security while also advocating for their own well-being and careers. Below are guiding principles to ensure our diplomatic professionals receive the treatment they deserve. Building a 21st century diplomatic corps. 1. Rebuild and retain expertise in the State Department's ranks. Given the deep damage to the top ranks of our nation's diplomats the past 3 years, a top priority must be rebuilding the diplomatic corps, including enhanced recruitment and retention efforts. Senior posts must be filled by those with commensurate experience and expertise, and promotions must represent the diversity in skills and experience of diplomatic professionals to ensure talented personnel do not leave the department. The current toxic work environment stemming from mismanagement and President Trump's attacks must be addressed by senior leadership to keep employees from leaving, especially individuals who bring unique expertise and diverse perspectives to the department. 2. Reduce barriers to restoring lost expertise for former diplomats and civil servants to return to the department. Over the last 3.5 years, the department has lost significant institutional and diplomatic expertise, both in the foreign and civil services. While fresh perspectives and young talent are a welcome addition, we must find more ways to enable those who have hard-earned national security expertise to rejoin the department and continue their service. The department and Congress should consider the merits of increasing avenues to enhance mid-career hiring authorities and ways to move laterally within the federal government between other foreign policy agencies and similar positions with similar skill sets. 3. Promote more career employees to senior positions. Those serving in senior leadership positions are increasingly less representative of the career Foreign Service officer and civil service workforce. In 1975, more than 60% of positions at the assistant secretary level and above were held by career Foreign Service officers. By 2014, only 30% were held by career Foreign Service officers. As of April 2020, career officials at the department hold only 8% of leadership positions at the assistant secretary level and above. According to the American Academy of Diplomacy, declining representation of the Foreign Service in senior leadership of the department results in a loss of long-term field perspective, a loss of Washington experience, and a failure to motivate long-term state employees. For those in the civil service, the problem is even more acute, as the large number of senior leadership positions held mostly by political appointees and a few Foreign Service officials effectively creates a promotion cap for civil service employees. Department leadership should consider expedited promotions for qualified career personnel into senior leadership positions. In addition to leading to better informed policy, maintaining a robust cadre of career diplomatic professionals in senior leadership positions reduces overall politicization of the department and will encourage career professionals to remain at the department if they know their hard-earned expertise is valued. 4. Increase diversity at senior ranks and throughout the department. Diversity, equity, and inclusion at the department is lacking, and traditionally underrepresented employees at the department face a difficult and different set of challenges and barriers in their careers. The department must heed the Government Accountability Office's recommendation to identify and address potential barriers to equal opportunity in the diplomatic workforce, and should also take measurable steps to increase diversity in the senior ranks of the department. Furthermore, the department should examine ways to increase transparency in the assignments process to ensure an objective set of criteria and metrics are the primary basis for assignment, and that implicit biases do not play a limiting role in an employee's career trajectory. Congress should immediately pass the Department of State Inclusivity Act, S. 3430, to enhance diverse representation of all kinds at all levels of the State Department. 5. Formalize the State Department exit survey process. To rebuild the diplomatic corps and retain talent, the department must accurately identify and address the barriers and challenges personnel face in the workplace. To gain a fuller understanding of the reasons department employees depart and ways to improve, the department must formalize its exit survey process for all employees, adjust annually to address issues raised in these surveys, and make key findings available to Congress. 6. Initiate a review of how the corridor reputation system at the department enables or exacerbates the challenges outlined in this report. While the department formally operates on a merit-based system, there is a clear understanding that one's informal corridor reputation, based on the views of peers and bureau leadership, plays a large role in career assignments, which can ultimately determine career advancement. Most recently, diplomats have expressed a hesitancy to raise concerns about diversity and harassment among other issues for fear of ruining their corridor reputation and being viewed as a problem child. The department must review the degree to which this corridor reputation system perpetuates historic institutional deficiencies. Congress must initiate a Government Accountability Office review to study how this system interacts with and possibly exacerbates the challenges outlined in this report, and issue recommendations based on their findings. 7. Restore and commit to minimum vetting standards. To undo the damage done by a series of nominees who lack the experience, expertise, tone, and tenor to serve as our nation's diplomats, the current and future administrations must take seriously their duty to genuinely and properly vet nominees both for their qualifications as well as for any conflicts of interest, misconduct, lack of good judgment, legal troubles, inappropriate statements, or other disqualifying behaviors. All nominees must be held to the same high standards as their career employee counterparts. 8. Prioritize and fill senior leadership slots. The department's senior positions, including undersecretaries, assistant secretaries, and ambassadors, set the stage for good leadership and help drive and implement U.S. foreign policy. There must be a focus on filling these positions early on in the administration, or within a short period of a newly created vacancy, to avoid the damaging effects of persistent vacancies left open for too long or filled by acting officials. Bolstering accountability at the department. 9. Maintain an independent Inspector General. Any potential fraud, waste, abuse, and misconduct at the State Department must be addressed by an independent Inspector General, chosen based solely on ability and integrity, and free from any conflicts of interest or political pressure. The ability to report misconduct to the Inspector General without fear of reprisal or political interference in investigations is paramount to the well-being of the State Department and its workforce. 10. Enforce accountability for improper personnel practices and management. Complaints to Congress and the Inspector General about retaliation and other misconduct at the department have demonstrated a need for reform of the department's complaint filing and review processes. Employees report feeling discouraged from lodging a complaint through formal human resource channels because it is reviewed by political appointees who may retaliate against them and ruin their careers. Employee complaints about workforce behavior must be taken seriously and met with accountability by department leadership without any politicization. Impunity for misconduct cannot be allowed to continue. The department must emphasize a zero-tolerance policy for retaliation and reprisal, including terminating any employee found to engage in such behavior, no matter their status or position. Every day, our diplomatic professionals work to ensure American safety and security, sometimes placing their lives on the line in their patriotic service. In exchange, they must be guaranteed the support of their leadership and a work environment free from politicization and discrimination. For the past 3 years, beset by extraordinary global challenges abroad and attacks and mismanagement at home, the work of the department's career professionals to safeguard and protect our nation's security has been jeopardized. This report serves as a first step in outlining the challenges facing our diplomatic corps and should serve as a warning of the future costs to our security if they are not addressed promptly. Addressing these challenges will take the immediate and ongoing focus of a broad coalition, including Congress, current and former State Department officials, civil society, and the current and future presidential administrations dedicated to rebuilding our long-established and world-renowned professional diplomatic corps. And that concludes Diplomacy in Crisis, the Trump administration's decimation of the State Department. As I've read this report over the month of August, there has been a lot more happening between the House Committee on Foreign Affairs and the State Department. Just last week, on August 28th, the chairman of the House Committee on Foreign Affairs, Eliot Engel, he announced the committee will begin work on a resolution to hold the Secretary of State in contempt. This comes after a request at the end of July when Engel issued a subpoena for thousands of pages of documents that were delivered to Senate Republicans. The July 31 press release says, just days after the conclusion of President Trump's impeachment trial, in which Secretary Pompeo refused to comply with a duly authorized subpoena for documents and attempted to block testimony of key witnesses, the State Department producing documents to the State Department producing documents... Maybe that should say the State Department is producing documents to Senate Republicans. I found a typo as part of the press release, so there you go. The Foreign Affairs Committee has learned that the State Department has produced 16,080 pages of allegedly responsive material to the Senate committees since February. Yesterday, in testimony before the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations, Secretary Pompeo committed to continuing to send information to Senate Republicans. But Secretary Pompeo has refused to provide the same information to the Foreign Affairs Committee, which has jurisdiction over the State Department. So what I read from that press release, apart from the typo, is that it's possible I could be reading a report from the Republicans in the Senate here in the future if they're trying to get something done before the election in November. And with that coming up, I think it will be helpful to have the background from this document that I just finished reading. I'd like to thank the donors that came in over this past month, starting with our 2 associate producers. I received $20 from Stephen Phillips, who is a returning associate producer from one of the Middle East Marshall Plan episodes. Thank you, Stephen. Also, associate producer recognition goes to Keith Albert, who donated $20 this last month, so thank you to Keith. Insiders who came in via insiderfriends.com or donating at governmentunfiltered.com on subscription through PayPal. I'll start with Brad Lissick, who came in at $5 a month via Patreon, and a thanks to Richard Beller, who came in at $5 a month through PayPal. Between those associate producer donations and those of you who continue to support on a monthly basis, either through PayPal or Patreon at insiderfriends.com, I know we also have a couple who donate anonymously through glow.fm/insider. It's because of you that this has been one of the better months. So I will keep going. I have a feeling with the election coming up, it may make it difficult to decide on exactly what I want to read for you. But like I said in the intro, I'm going to do my best to find things that are interesting to me, so hopefully they'll be interesting to you as well. If you found value in this episode, as well as other episodes I produce, please continue donating or sharing this episode with friends. You can follow along on Twitter at GovUnfiltered or on Facebook, facebook.com/governmentunfiltered. If you'd like to be listed as an associate producer on the next episode, please donate $20 or more via governmentunfiltered.com or via glow.fm/insider. Executive producer donations come in at $50 and above, and you can also contribute on a monthly basis at insiderfriends.com. Your support is helping toward ensuring the future of this podcast. Thank you for listening.